You're performing an act you think keeps you safe. You shrink your voice so it doesn't annoy anyone. You dim your light so its glare won't hurt others. You refuse credit when it's due. You adapt so precisely that you forget who you are. And every time you do this, a piece of your being fractures. A small betrayal to yourself, repeated 1,000 times, becomes a wound that bleeds invisibility. It's not humility. That mask isn't worn out of grace or empathy. You cloak yourself in self-effacement out of fear that if you shine, they'll lash back, fear that admitting your worth will be met with disgust, envy, accusation, fear that in your glow you'll feel utterly alone. So you shrink, you isolate, you let your greatness slip toward irrelevance, hoping no one notices, but most of all, hoping no one demands you stop. Here's the twist. That false humility isn't protection, it's self-erasure. You aren't safe, you're invisible, you're not living, you're merely surviving in the shadows of your own potential. Every suppressed gift chips away at your essence, it hollows you out. Remember when you first felt that spark, that creative surge, that craving to leave a mark. It was raw, unfiltered, unashamed, but then something within turned away. A voice whispered, "Be smaller," so you complied. Yet that voice, born of fear and conditioning, didn't free you. It imprisoned you. And when you refuse to speak your mind or own your power, those dark corners of your being don't disappear. They ferment. They twist themselves into doubt, regret, self-sabotage. Now you feel dull. You feel buried. A dull ache lives inside like a muted scream. That ache is your truth trying to surface. It's your authenticity suffocating. Here's what's essential. You don't dismantle the facade by hiding more. You do it by shining more. Not arrogantly, not to prove, but by simply being in full light, to stand up straight, to speak out, to let your presence orbit the space without apologies or disclaimers. That's how you disrupt the pattern of invisibility. What's it cost? Comfort, safety, approval, but here's the thing. Some of those comforts were prisons disguised as rest stops, and approval. It's a crumb of sugar in a sugarless world. A fleeting hit that leaves you hungry and aching. When you don't live visibly, others fill the void. Voices less skilled, less wholehearted, less honest rise to occupy the space you abandoned. And you watch, wondering how they got there while spitting on your own gifts, convinced they'll break the world if unleashed. Enough. It's not about loudness. It's about presence. About acting from the center, not the edges. About speaking because something within demands it, not because you've been invited. To exist unmediated by permission. There's a kind of humility worth having, a humility that sees your strengths and tends them, that demands you temper your confidence with curiosity, empathy, integrity. But that's not the self-erasure dance. That's grounded authenticity. Real humility sustains your gifts. It doesn't bury them, and, in a cruel, ironic inversion, the world rewards that kind of rooted presence, that voice, that resonance, not always with popularity, but with depth, with meaning, with lives shifted because you dared. You might ask, but what if people don't like it? What if they call me arrogant, divisive, intense? What if I'm left standing in empty rooms while the socially calibrated soul gains all the screen time? So what? They were never yours to win, not in full. Your voice isn't measured by hearts and shares. It's measured by truth expressed through presence, and those who stay, they're the ones who needed to hear it. They don't just want you, they needed you. Now, here's the harder part, breaking free from external validation addiction. You expose yourself and you wait. A like, a comment, a reaction. It becomes a fix. You crave it, but eventually it grinds you down. A faucet you can't shut off, a rolling treadmill you can't get off. No, this journey isn't about applause, it's about alignment. You show up because your inner world demands it, not because the outer world rewards it. You breathe into your own center. You speak because you're living in integrity. You perform because in every recovered moment you stand, a creature of purpose, not performance. Will there be criticism? Of course, people will judge, some will misunderstand, some will attack not what you say, but the entire premise that someone might outrank their own lives with an inner mission, the backlash won't break you if your foundation is secure. Here's the real tipping point. Liberty isn't the absence of fear, it's showing up despite the fear. It's being the flawed, raw, calling out version of you, not diluted, not designed to please, not tuned for inoffensiveness. That presence magnifies not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And when you stand that way, something unusual happens. You don't merely rouse yourself, you stir others. You don't just exist, you open portals. A single blunt admission can shift a room, a video, a lifeline. Entire legacies germinate in that space, because the world doesn't need another mediocre shade. It needs someone unafraid to shine, but it gets even more profound. Once you ditch the mask and detach from applause, you face something scarier, your own power, not flaunted, not manipulative, but real, that primal energy inside, your capacity to create, move, unmake, reconfig. That power scares you because power cuts two ways. It can liberate or devastate, and you learned early that shining equals breaking, so you flee, but freedom isn't escaping. Freedom is inhabiting the whole. That choice, flat lights, still camera, no audience, is terrifying. A raw meeting with yourself, where no applause can fill the echo, where your own stillness, your own sufficiency, your own form in the void, stands or collapses by truth alone. You'll confront limits, mistakes, hunger, but you'll also discover strength, depth, gravity. Imagine for a moment, no longer needing an audience, not performing but being. To wake and know you matter, not because someone hit subscribe, but because you are here with intention, with weight, with gravity. You matter because you fell into your own orbit, not anyone else's. That is the true formula. It's not glamour, not sensational, not viral. It's rootedness. It's the quiet that precedes everything, the clarity that speaks, the voice that resonates because it reflects an unfiltered soul. So what do you do now? You reclaim the right to shine, you honor your voice, you let go of demand for love, clout, credit, you anchor in your own stance, you breathe into each word, you speak your thought, you let people go if they can't stand you. You follow the trace of your own impulse, even when it leads away from the crowd. There's no neat framework, no formula. It's not about trending, it's about being in your place, from your center, even if it's invisible for a while. Because visible or not, you are calling, you are shifting, you are alive when you feel the resistance, the gross absence, the pulling away. That's the pulse of new creation, not the echo of repetition. Let's drop the pretense. You don't need to be more. You've been more all along, skewed away. Now you unearth yourself. You resume your rightful curve in existence. You stop asking permission to matter. You let your message break the silence, even if only a crack. This isn't hype, it's survival, the survival of your inner universe, the reclamation of your right to matter, the defiance of being formatted, neutered, researched, reduced. It's the rebellion of being unapologetically you, in color, in shape, in full transmission. And so here's your invitation, your challenge, your stamp on this moment. Let your presence exist. Untamed, unformatted, unwatched. Speak, shine, hold your space, no audience needed, no fans, no validations, just you showing up, you expansive, you real. You've been kneeling to safety, now stand and see what grows behind you. And maybe now, as your shoulders rise a little higher, as your breath deepens with the weight of unspoken truths, you realize the power you've abandoned wasn't just about speaking, it was about seeing. Seeing with unfiltered eyes what you are, what you've lost, what you still carry, and there is pain in that, because to truly see yourself, you must also see the wreckage left behind when you chose silence. The moments you abandoned your art because you feared judgment, the relationships you dimmed your fire for, the ideas you buried beneath a mask of reasonableness, so that no one would call you extreme. The grief is real, and it arrives not to destroy you, but to awaken you. You mourn the person you never let live, the version of you that spoke with clarity and walked with fire, but never made it past your imagination. And this mourning is sacred because it opens a gate, not just to memory but to choice. Now you get to choose, again, not with regret but with ferocity, and the truth is, this moment, right now, is the last time you ever need to betray yourself again. If you want it, you can end it here. You can begin with trembling words, imperfect gestures, a soul that doesn't know where it's headed, but that knows it will no longer crawl, it will walk, it will sing even when its voice cracks. It will rise even if no one applauds. That's the beginning. That's the contract between you and your existence. The first lie that must die is the belief that being seen is dangerous. You learned this young. That eyes on you meant pressure, that attention meant exposure, and exposure meant attack. But being seen is not inherently dangerous. It's only dangerous when you confuse your essence with the reaction it provokes. But your essence stands outside of judgment. It isn't threatened by misunderstanding. It isn't defined by applause or indifference. It simply is. Your task is not to protect it. It is to express it. This is the reason why art, voice, message, presence, they matter more than strategy or systems. Because they're the only thing that can't be fabricated. Anyone can copy tactics. Anyone can mimic structure. But your essence, when fully embodied, is unrepeatable. It carves space that nothing else can. That's why you can walk into a room, say little, and still shift the temperature. Because people don't feel your words first. They feel your being. They feel if you are there, or if you are hiding behind a polished version of yourself. This is why your job isn't to impress, it's to inhabit. To take up space as someone who has nothing to prove but everything to say. And when you begin to inhabit yourself that way, something else happens. The shame begins to die, the shame that told you you're too much, the shame that made you edit your laughter, dull your tears, censor your brilliance. It begins to rot in the face of self-possession. And in its place grows something else, sovereignty. And sovereignty is not dominance. It's not control. It's not conquest. It's stillness. It's the profound stability of a person who does not need to be liked, because they already belong to themselves. That belonging, internal, unwavering, unapologetic, is your revolution. It's how you become unshakable in a world that profits from your disorientation. You've been made to believe that safety lies in obedience. That following the script ensures love, ensures money, ensures peace, but it's a lie. The safest people are not those who obey. They are those who know exactly who they are. Because when you know yourself, you don't bend with every wind. You don't lose yourself in every role. You don't chase every hand that offers approval. You become your own authority, and yes, that means you'll lose some people. Some will leave not because you've changed, but because they can no longer manipulate the version of you that craved their validation. Let them leave, not in bitterness but in clarity, because anyone who loves your silence over your truth was never really loving you at all. And the more real you become, the more clear your life becomes. Choices simplify, relationships clarify, work aligns. You don't have to micromanage everything. You start trusting your instincts. You stop needing to ask permission. You trust the tremble in your chest, the fire in your gut, the knowing that rises unbidden. You trust it even when it contradicts logic, even when it makes no sense to anyone but your soul. And this is the part that's hardest to teach. You will lose predictability. You will lose certainty, but you will gain freedom. True freedom, not the kind you post about, the kind you live, the kind that breathes into your spine when you walk into a room knowing you are not performing, you are transmitting, the kind that makes you stop asking, "Is this okay?" and start declaring, "This is true." And in that space, between doubt and declaration, you are reborn. You start choosing different things. You say no more often. You leave spaces that dull you. You create things that terrify you. You stop being palatable. You stop diluting. You stop negotiating your worth. And the silence you feared, it becomes sanctuary. You realize you can go days without approval and still be full. That the well inside doesn't dry up just because others are busy. You become a well that feeds itself, and when you speak, it is from overflow, not from desperation. That's when your voice becomes magnetic, not because it pleases, but because it's undeniable. Because it is saturated with something most people have forgotten how to access, truth that costs something, truth that's been wrestled with, truth that's been bled for, and people will feel it. They won't always know why. But they will stop scrolling. They will lean in. They will say things like, "I don't know what it is about you, but I needed this." Because what they really needed was realness. What they really needed was someone who wasn't trying to sell themselves as a product. Someone who was simply being, and if you let it, this kind of living will change every part of your life, not overnight, not with glitter, but deeply. You'll start waking up without dread. You'll start feeling your own presence in your bones. You'll start recognizing your past not as something to hide, but as the source of your medicine. You'll stop apologizing for your intensity, your vision, your grief. You'll start trusting that the exact texture of your being was designed for something only you can build. Not everyone will see it, but the right ones will, and the ones who don't, they're not your path. Let them fade. You don't have to convince. You don't have to explain. Your energy is your message now. Your clarity is your signature. Your alignment is your marketing. You become so rooted in your mission that anything out of resonance becomes obvious, not because you've calculated it, but because you've remembered yourself. And in remembering yourself, you become dangerous to every system that profits from your forgetfulness. That's why this work is spiritual, not just practical. It threatens the very structures that require you to be small. But you were never born to be small. You were born to shape reality through your presence, and so you keep showing up. You keep peeling off layers. You keep unlearning. You keep unbecoming the version of you that was never real. And as you do, life stops being a chase. It becomes an offering, a surrender, a co-creation. Even your fear softens. It stops being the enemy. It becomes information. It becomes a signal that you're near something sacred. You learn to walk with it, not run from it. You hold space for the shaking. You let the trembling hands still in the sunlight of your courage. You learn to be with yourself, in silence, in discomfort, in grief, in expansion, and that presence, unshaken, unwavering, becomes your compass. You stop needing maps. You stop copying blueprints. You start building what's never been built before, because you've never been here before. You are not a repeat. You are not a replica. You are a first edition, and when you own that, your life begins to echo with original resonance, the kind that doesn't just speak, it reverberates. It doesn't just inspire, it activates. It doesn't just lead, it liberates, and that is your real task, to liberate through embodiment, to walk as freedom, to speak as truth, to live as a signal that says, it's safe to be real, it's safe to feel, it's safe to shine, it's safe to stop pretending. You don't need another course, another guru, another set of rules. You need your own voice, unfiltered. You need your own permission. You need your own reckoning. And it begins now, in this breath, in this pulse, in this reclaiming, because no one is coming to rescue you from the silence you chose. No one is arriving to hand you back your fire. You do that, you rise. You decide, you unleash, and when you do, the world doesn't just notice, it changes.